The proper medical name for Tommy John surgery is UCL reconstruction, or a complete rebuilding of the ulnar collateral ligament. Your UCL holds together your ulna, the inner bone of the forearm, and your humerus, the upper arm bone, or in the case of baseball players and more specifically pitchers, it tries really hard to hold them together. The force of throwing a 90-mile-per-hour fastball is more than enough to tear the UCL in a cadaver, so that's why there aren't many dead guys pitching in the majors. Prior to the year of our Lord 1974, if you were a pitcher and ended up with a dead arm, as it was called, it meant your career was basically over unless you wanted to pitch through immense pain. Sandy Koufax chose to retire at the peak of his career because he was dealing with severe elbow pain and allegedly went to extreme measures to even be able to pitch. Allegedly, going as far as to take horse tranquilizers. He must have gotten them from Mr. Ed. It's been theorized that Koufax had a UCL injury, but unfortunately for Sandy, he was about 8 years too early. It would instead be another Dodgers southpaw who would be the first to undergo the surgery that might have saved Koufax's career, and his name is ingrained into the game of baseball, deeper even than some of the greatest players in its history. Tommy John broke into Major League Baseball at just 20 years old, making his debut in September of 1963. He quickly established himself as a good workhorse, throwing no fewer than 175 innings a year between 1965 and 1973. In 1974, he had thrown 151 innings when he took the mound against the Montreal Expos on July 17th. However, in the third inning of that start, John said he felt, quote, "the strangest sensation I've ever known, as if my body continued to go forward and my left arm had just flown out to right field." He had felt, like so many had before him and so many would after, the twinge of pain in his arm that meant disaster had occurred in their elbow. The Dodgers team surgeon, Dr. Frank Jobe, diagnosed John with what he called overuse syndrome and instructed him to ice his arm for a few days. The situation, somewhat predictably, did not improve. When John tried to throw batting practice nearly a month later, he couldn't even reach home plate. He was going to have to go under the knife. From here on, I'm going to turn you over to Tom Hackimer, who was nice enough to jump on board and share his research. You see, he's a bit of an expert on the subject at hand. I also strongly recommend you check out his YouTube channel for more great content. He provides an actual window into the life of a professional baseball player, whereas the majority, myself included, can only speculate.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. I'm Tom, I play minor league baseball, currently for the New York Mets, and I have some first-hand experience with Tommy John surgery, as I am currently rehabbing from it. As a result of this, I've done a lot of reading into the history of the surgery, and, well, here we are. When Dr. Jobe initially went into Tommy John's elbow, the plan was just to repair his UCL, as was common practice at the time. This meant the old ligament would just be reattached rather than putting a graft for a new ligament in. It would almost certainly mean Tommy John's career on the field was over, but he could go about the rest of his life normally. However, when Dr. Jobe went into his elbow, he discovered that there wasn't enough UCL to be repaired. Tommy John's UCL had been worn down to practically nothing over years of use. So Dr. Jobe had to improvise and use a forearm tendon, the palmaris longus, and fashion it into a replacement for John's UCL. Use of this tendon was common in hand and wrist surgeries, but it had never been used in an elbow, let alone the elbow of a major league pitcher. Now, ligament replacement surgeries were nothing new at the time. A quick Google search shows me that the record of the first ACL reconstruction was in 1898. And let me tell you, as someone who had an ACL reconstruction 116 years after that, with all the wonderful advances in medical technology in that time period, I cannot imagine how awful the first ACL reconstruction rehab must have been. But anyway, ACL reconstruction remains one of the most common orthopedic surgeries performed every year in the United States. But on September 25th, 1974, Frank Jobe effectively ad-libbed the first ever UCL reconstruction on Tommy John. And since then, the name of the first man to undergo this surgery has become synonymous with the surgery itself. At the time, Dr. Jobe was quoted saying that even after this experimental surgery, there was a 1 in 100 chance that Tommy John would ever pitch again. He did pitch again, and for another 15 years after the surgery, throwing over 2,500 more big league innings, more than he had thrown before the surgery. He appeared in 3 different World Series that contained only 2 different teams, twice with the Dodgers against the Yankees, and once with the Yankees against the Dodgers. Tommy John surgery didn't immediately become the new standard, and the records of who had it are difficult to find even up to the 2000s. The second pitcher to undergo the surgery was Brent Strom, former Padres pitcher and current Diamondbacks pitching coach, and his was 4 years after the original. David Wells had it in 1985 and pitched for 22 years after the surgery, which is believed to be a record in and of itself. He also may have been the first Tommy John surgery done by Dr. James Andrews, who is one of the most prominent elbow surgeons in baseball for many years. Other notable victims of Tommy John are Kerry, one of the 4 pitchers to ever strike out 20 batters in a game, Jim Morris of the Rookie fame, and John Smoltz, who, when inducted in 2015, became the first Hall of Fame pitcher to have had the surgery. In modern times, the rate at which pitchers have Tommy John surgery has increased to the point where it's almost commonplace in baseball. In any given year, anywhere from a quarter to a third of all the pitchers who appear in a major league game have had the surgery. Of all the pitchers on the 40-man rosters of all 30 teams this year, 33.3% have had Tommy John surgery in the past or are currently recovering from it, which is exactly 1/3, following the trend of the rate generally rising in recent years. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on why this is happening, because there are plenty of people that pretend to do that already. What I will say is that guys are throwing harder than ever, and that puts more stress on the elbow. Surgical precision and rehab procedures are basically the best they've ever been. We understand how to avoid setbacks, what's most important at different times in the process, and what sort of timeline gives the best results while also not taking too long. So guys are coming back more regularly and often stronger than they were when they got hurt. So the injury isn't as big a hindrance to anyone's career as it used to be. Obviously, injuries can still derail careers, such as the previously mentioned Kerry, but overall the return rate from Tommy John surgery is usually reported to be over 80%, and is generally considered one of the more predictable surgeries that a pitcher can have. It just comes with a lengthy rehab period.